Lay. Yeah.
Kane is in the building.
Good evening on this Monday afternoon. Time is now 4 p.m, just a little bit after 4 p.m, and you're listening to The Fourth Estate on Brunel University's radio station, where we're talking about the news of the week and the news of the weekend as well, and what caught all the front page headlines of all major newspapers. As usual, I'm always joined by a line of guests, and today we've gone from 4 to a 3, and it's not as international as last time. We've got someone from Scotland here today, but we'll see. So we'll introduce you guys to them. This is The Fourth Estate with the guests. Let's go start, Alice.
I'm Alistair. I'm an MA journalism student here at Brunel, and I guess the resident Scottish person for tonight. So I'll try and give some insight into that.
No lying today. And you don't say you're from The Guardian.
I'm not in the mood to exaggerate. I'll play it straight tonight.
All right. Next, what do we have?
Hello, my name is Pan Ye. I'm from China, and I'm studying international journalism.
My name is Camilla. I'm from Norway. I'm studying international journalism at Brunel.
And you've heard Pan and Camilla last week as well. And so, yeah, starting off, we'll get things running a bit. So we're going to go through different papers from the US and the UK. So starting off the Financial Times, Ukraine separatists in deadly rocket attack on Mariupol. At least 30 people were killed and nearly 100 injured after a residential neighborhood came under rocket attack on Saturday as fighting in Ukraine breakaway east escalated. And the footage showed that dark smoke rising over the city's eastern district, shattering windows and apartment buildings, and bodies lying on streets charred by the blast. Now, Ukraine and Russia, it's been in paper for a long time, especially with last year with the MH370 being shot down by a missile either coming from Russia or Ukraine. Does anyone know actually what happened with a missile? Do you know who took the blame for that?
To be honest,
nobody took the blame. Are you asking if we're complicit with secret information from the Russian Federation? Unfortunately, I'm not on speed dial with Putin anymore, but I think both sides are obviously denying their involvement in it. But I think the main thing about this war, if you even call it a war, it's a proxy war, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just protracted and terrible, and really it's kind of been drawn out and prolonged, and it's one of these things which will just become very, institutionalized in that part of the world. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia in a similar kind of, it depends what kind of prejudice you have, what point of view you take. If you take a more Western NATO point of view, it was a land grab, but that was done and dusted in a couple of days, minimal casualties, and as far as unsolicited attacks go, it was fairly carefree. This is just coming to something much, much worse, and I think the word is protracted. It's just been drawn out, and it's absolutely horrendous.
So the EU Vice President Federica Mogherini, she condemned the indiscriminate attacks on Mariupol, and she warned that the Russian-backed rebels' refusal to observe a ceasefire would lead to a further grave deterioration of relations between the EU and Russia. And I just want to know, do you think there's some sort of truth to that statement? Do you think it's going to actually make connections between Russia and EU worse? Because people always say Russia is a bad country, a bad nation with Putin in head of state, but I haven't seen much action against Russia. They always say, if you do one more thing in the future, we'll take you down, and then... Well,
that's not true. The EU's put huge economic sanctions on Russia, and that's why Russia's in a triple dip recession or something. I'm not clued up in the facts, but they're in a really seriously dire economic situation at the moment, which is a direct consequence of the European and American sanctions. But I suppose your point is that it's patently obvious that this isn't enough to prevent them from continuing whatever operations they're conducting in the Ukraine.
Camilla, what do you make of this, Camilla?
I don't really know, because we never know what's actually happening in Russia. We don't get any news about what's happening inside Russia, and no one on the Russian side ever comments or tell the truth about how the state of the public is at the moment. So, yeah.
But for what I read, is the Ukrainians are criticizing Russian, support the terrorists, but the Russian are saying that they trying to talk to the Ukraine, but none of them reply to their letters or words. So yes, it's a kind of two sides have two different kind of words. So
I think it's important to try and realise the situation is viewed through two very different polemics. The European and the Western view is, as you said, is that Russia are what they call the Russian bear. They are this kind of power-hungry, land-grabbing, violent nation. But for the same token, they are faced by a kind of ideologically different unit on their doorstep, the EU. And they feel threatened by the expansion, and though the EU expands through soft power by including states into an economic union, it still has kind of serious political and defence consequences. So with Russia not being part of this group, and they never will be part of the European Union, just if you take a historical precedent, they will always feel threatened by a larger party on their doorstep. But obviously you can't really justify things like them supplying rebels who proceed to shoot down civilian aircraft and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So, Saturday's civilian death toll is the worst in a single incident in 2 weeks of intensified fighting that threatened to undermine renewed international talks to end a 10th-month conflict that has claimed more than 5,000 lives. Almost daily fighting in defiance of the September ceasefire agreement has claimed more than 1,000 lives, but intensity of fighting has been lower than summer battles. The shelling of Mariupol has renewed fears that Russia is using the separatists to secure a land bridge to its Crimea, which it annexed last year. And now we'll move on to our second story from the Financial Times that's been caught the headlines, I think, ever since Thursday evening, when it was reported that Saudi Arabia King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud has passed away. Well, leaders are going to congregate in Saudi Arabia, I think, later this week to pay respects to the role he played in geopolitics for decades, and they hope to bolster ties with Arab's world's largest economy. So, French President Francois Hollande and Russian Premier Dmitry Medvedev met the new king and his entourage on Saturday, while David Cameron, the UK Prime Minister, and Prince Charles will arrive on Saturday. President Obama will cut short his visit to India and fly to Saudi Arabia to meet the newly installed King Salman and other officials. Now, before I move on to actually Saudi Arabia, I found it quite interesting, and I told this to Camilla before, that it's interesting that Obama cut short his trip to India to pay respect to Saudi Arabia, but when it happened to Charlie Hebdo, he didn't make time to go there and join the world leaders at the actual in Paris. I mean, what's your guys' take on this?
I think the only reason that America care about Saudi Arabia now is because they
oil. Are you gonna say oil?
Yes,
You
because
always
they
say
are.
oil.
Yes, but oil is everything. Americans are depending on Saudi Arabia, like filling the oil market with oil at the moment to create trouble in Russia, and that's why they make a big deal out of this.
Obama and his other heads of state in the Western world, they can go on and on and on about the importance of human rights and gender equality, etc. But this is just the most flagrant act of hypocrisy to honour Abdullah's to commemorate his death like this. Even they were flying flags at half-mast over Whitehall this week in respect of his passing. He's deemed as a reformer, but I think that's basically in relation to what his predecessor and where the country was before. Saudi Arabia has a really, really abhorrent human rights record, and it's not as going as far as say you're justifying that kind of civil rule, but by honouring his death like that, it suggests a certain leniency towards that way of governance. No more obvious than with the blogger, what's he called? I've got written.
Raif Abdawi, I think.
Badawi. He was meant to get his 50 nicks lashes, but that had to be postponed because he hadn't recovered from the 50 he got a fortnight before, which is just it's so
cruel.
tragic.
It's
It's really, really, really bad. They have this male guardianship system where women, they can't actually have any real civil liberties. They don't have a right to an education. They can't even get a passport. They can't travel without a male relative kind of authorising it. So for our enlightened leaders to go over to and commemorate that man's passing, I think it's just a terrible exhibition of what you'd call realpolitik, which is as Camilla said, their interest in the strategic and material importance of Saudi Arabia.
Indeed. See, the kingdom has allowed oil prices to halve over 4 months with lower government spending to dampen economic growth. But the thing is with Saudi Arabia is that they can actually rely on its large reserves to maintain expenditure, while other countries who depend on oil really can't have that privilege.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. They have something like 75% of the world's supply of crude oil. Something ridiculous. That really, really high.
And they can play around with it because they got the power, and whoever has oil has the power. What do you make of the successor? Because apparently, Financial Times report, he has a reputation for being more conservative than actually King Abdullah, and it's some people have questioned whether actually will social freedoms and freedom of expression be a priority for King Salman. I mean, have you heard much about his hair?
I heard on the radio from an expert in Middle Eastern politics that she had kind of inside information that the heir was going to pardon the blogger, but that's just hearsay at the moment. I suppose if he's got a expectation or a reputation for being more conservative, then it's not very optimistic looking forward to the future. But the whole Middle Eastern part of the world is just in turmoil right now, and they really need some genuine democratic stability from a country like Saudi Arabia, which is the very heart of the region, which can bring some stability to the area, but that doesn't look likely at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think democracy is going to be a viable option for Saudi Arabia. What do you think, Pan? I mean, how has China's Prime Minister made a comment on King Abdullah's passing? Do you know anything about that?
In Chinese newspaper, not really, but
they don't care about him, I guess.
Yeah, kind of, because we also have oil, and so we can. But what I read is like, why Obama like respect the king, or he regarded it so important, is because the president really cared about the ISIS, like how the Saudi Arabia will play the role in the ISIS, will like they continue to fight them or to join them. So this is not all about oil, maybe about ISIS, I think.
Just before we go to a quick break, I mean, there was something that I read on the news, I think, about 2 days ago, somewhere along there. There's a conference, I think, held in London with a lot of world leaders about ISIS, and apparently fighters from the Kurdish fighters weren't invited, even though they played a huge role, I guess, especially, I think, in keeping the borders. And they got a bit miffed about that, and they said it's kind of unfair that I think Turkey was invited, but not these people who were actually fighting and putting their lives down.
The Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces. I hadn't heard this story, so they've been excluded from this conference.
They weren't invited.
That's terrible, isn't it?
Because, I mean, a lot of it is between, I think, Turkey and the Kurdish fighters, so a lot of things going on in that state. But, I mean, people were putting down their lives. I think they got a say on how it's going to affect them in the future. Right. So, before we end our first segment, King Abdullah has been regarded within the kingdom as a cautious reformer who made limited progress in fields such as educational and economic reform, balancing the need for change against a powerful religious establishment. When we come back, we're going to talk about the ECB, European Central Bank, as well as the mansion tax in the UK. This is The Fourth Estate on Radio Brunel. Time now about 4:16 on this Monday evening, and you're listening to The Fourth Estate on Radio Brunel University student-run station. Talking about the news of the week, we've got the European Central Bank, and this has been in headlines for a bit, especially in the Financial Times, about the euro tumbling to the lowest for 11 years. It hit a new low as fresh evidence emerged of Germany's visceral opposition to the ECB landmark quantitative easing package. The single currency, the euro, has fallen from the 1.113 and 1.112 marks by midday, and dropping more than 2% against the dollar to 1.111, its lowest since 2004. Now, numerically, it doesn't seem that big. I mean, it's just like 1 cent different. But in retrospect, I guess, and sort of looking at generally, it is quite a big number. Now, see, while they have caught issues of the Eurozone as well, what is happening between Angela Merkel, Germany's head of state as well, German Chancellor, with the ECB's president, chief Mario Draghi, is that apparently connections between the two of them haven't been really the best in terms. It's an interesting thing. I don't know what else we can talk about that other than, I mean, it's curious to see how the euro will turn out. Now, I know Camilla has been very vocal about her opposition to the euro and the EU as well, being Norwegian. I mean, what do you make of this? Are you going to say, I told you so, or are you going to go, Norway's better?
I would have said that, but the krona in Norway is pretty weak at the moment as well because of the oil.
You can't really say that, can you? No. But yeah, I mean, what else do you make of that? The story?
I think that the EU now is going to get just weaker and weaker. I think it's a chance that the UK is not gonna want to be a part of the EU anymore, and the same is happening to Greece. So I think it's only going to be Germany and France that holds it all together, and they have to. Yeah.
I think the effect it'll have in British politics will be quite interesting because UKIP, they really focus their argument on immigration, and their kind of financial policy has always taken second tier to that. So running up to the May election, I'd be very, very surprised if Mr. Nigel Farage, the man of the moment, if he doesn't really latch onto this and will bolster his immigration argument with the kind of empirical financial reasoning to supposedly leave the European Union, which wouldn't be good.
Well, Nigel Farage said, I think he got his own issues to worry about. I think he's been on the headlines a bit this week about things that have been made about his party, and his party saying things that are a bit interesting to say. But we'll talk about that a bit later. I mean, the euro, I mean, it's always going to be a weird thing to talk about, whether people should join it, whether people should leave it. I mean, there's been actually no record of any country leaving it, haven't...
Yeah, no, I don't know what the alternative is. What, regression back into national currency?
Yeah, I mean, that would be kind of a hard step to take for any country.
Yeah, the instability that would cause would presumably be far worse than sticking with it and seeing it through. I think we all just have to have as much faith in Germany as possible, because without them we're in a really bad situation.
But I mean, the UK have pounds, you don't have euros, so...
Yeah, but our pound trades competitively against the euro, so however that reacts, then US dollar will drop and the pound will go similarly. So unfortunately we're very symbiotic with the euro.
And we'll talk now, moving on to homeowners exploring ways to avoid looming mansion tax in the UK. Wealthy homeowners will try to avoid paying any new mansion tax by splitting up the property or minimizing its valuation, people have predicted. So properties just above the 2 million threshold could fall in value, as the owners will have to pay a £3,000 annual levy, while Western investors could be deterred from coming to London. So the mansion tax, it's a bit of an interesting, thing to put into place. Taxing...
I don't know what the story is here. Rich people find a tax loophole. That's effectively, I think they've been doing that for a very, very long time.
Exactly. I mean, yeah.
I think if you've got a lot of money, you're going to do everything in your power
to keep it,
to avoid giving it back to the state.
Yeah. Like, no, I've earned this money and I want to keep it. So Labour has said its policy is a fair way to raise money during a time of austerity to maintain crucial public services like the NHS. But critics have warned that in parts of London, a 2 million home may be a flat or modest family resident rather than a mansion. Now, it is called a mansion tax. I don't think that it's limited to just a mansion house. I think it could be anything. But it's interesting that a 2 million home could just be a flat.
Yeah, and the geographical divide is going to be a weird one. I was reading somewhere in Wales, by kind of the most current research, only 87 properties in the entirety of Wales will fall into that kind of £2 million threshold, which it seems like a weird dynamic where it will have such a minimal impact to one of the home nations, and presumably in Scotland too, which similarly to Wales is quite a socialist country. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. Obviously, Labour want to tax the rich. Conservatives want to try and avoid that as much as possible. But realistically, it's still the people at the bottom of the pile, the people earning minimum wage, who are going to be most hurt. So yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath in this legislation really kind of coming. Is it being enacted? It's still in.
I think it has been. I think it's going to be enacted. I think soon. But Camilla and Pan, do you have something equivalent back in your home countries in China and in Norway?
Yep. Yes, we have.
What is it? What do you have?
I don't know the exact number, but like we have to pay tax for, the government gave each of the family a limited number of space that you can have. If your house or your flat exceeds the number, then you have to pay for the tax. So like some family or some couples try to pretending divorce to avoid those kind of tax, but some of them maybe end up with actual divorce for this. So it's like a really big problem for China.
That could be a Hollywood movie right there. I think let's pretend to be divorced to get cheaper taxes and then we're actually divorced. Camilla, what do you make?
What we have in Norway is fortune tax. So it depends on your fortune. You have to pay tax based on that.
That's such a poetic name. I love that. A fortune tax.
Yes.
Get your treasure in like a big case, gold doubloons.
So you don't you have to pay tax based on what you already have and your fortune. In Norway, it's really usual for people who have a lot of money to invest in real estate instead of putting everything in a bank. Because that's more profitable and you don't risk, it's not that many risks involved as putting it in a bank. So I don't know what I think about this. I mean, as it says, like if you live in London, a 2 million flat is not that big. But if you live on the countryside or in the Midlands, it can be a mansion. But does that really matter? People have earned this money, so they should be able to keep them.
Yeah, exactly. It is hard to earn money. Unless you're doing just fraud, and it depends.
That's controversial.
Controversial indeed. So, Mr. Mead, director of Douglas and Gordon, has said that in order to dodge a tax would be quite an easy thing to do. He's an example of a 4 million Chelsea townhouse. He said that it could be converted into a 2.5 million maisonette and an 850,000 basement flat, which then can be registered under 2 separate leases, which grant yourself a longer leasehold and diminish the value of your property. It's a bit of a crazy thing to do, but we shall see. We'll move on, as previously talked about. UKIP and Nigel Farage has hit back at defector Amjad Bashir. He has launched a withering attack on the integrity of the MEP who on Sunday went to the Conservative Party, and he has defended the party against fresh allegations of extremism. On the BBC's One Andrew Marr show, and Farage told that UKIP has become increasingly alarmed by Bashir's behaviour and that other MPs in the party had been begging him to get rid of Bashir in October and November last year. He said Bashir didn't tell them about the truth about unemployment of illegal immigrants in his businesses, and that there were some big open questions in Brussels about money involving the MEP, and that Bashir had been linked to political extremists from Pakistan. Farage.
I think it's just the political game being played out. Bashir was obviously Farage's kind of poster boy. He was a UKIP member, kind of an ethnic minority, which is absolutely fantastic for a party which is, constantly stymied with allegations of racism. So it seems to me that Farage, he's known about all these indictments, the illegal immigrants working for him, etc., etc. But for himself to come out and criticise one of his own party, especially one as important as Bashir, that would be absolutely kind of insane for him to do that. So now he's defected. This is a perfect opportunity for revenge.
Camilla, Pan?
I was just, because last week we had a similar story, but that was Daily Mail or something, and they were trashing the Labour Party, and now it's basically The Guardian trashing UKIP, so this is like a next step in the trashing campaign.
We're going to see a lot of time until May 2015. Actually, we'll see it even after May 2015. We'll see lots of trashing papers going against each other and going against different parties.
Yeah.
This is the latest in Farage's sort of troubles in the UKIP party. The Sunday Mirror had published quotes from the 2 speeches that Matthew Richardson, UKIP's party secretary, gave in America in 2010 to Conservative audiences, where he described the NHS as the biggest waste of money in the UK, and that it was at the heart of the Reichstag bunker of socialism. And the Sunday Times then revealed that Richardson told a meeting last month, I said before, people talk about UKIP being bigots. There are hundreds of thousands of bigots in the United Kingdom, and they deserve representation. You were saying it's sort of linked to, I think ethnic racism or ethnic discrimination in the UKIP, and it's interesting to see this coming out from one of their members. But not that surprising, I think, to actually hear these comments coming out from someone from UKIP. It is interesting, but not exactly mind-blowing. Something you sort of expect from UKIP, I guess. Would you agree, Camilla?
I mean, healthcare in Norway is free. It's always been free. That's one of the main focuses in the politics on each party. So I think discussing it being insurance-based is a bit, what about people without insurance?
Yeah.
The NHS should be free.
So Farage, who in the past has called the NHS to be replaced with an insurance-based system, said UK has had an intensive, extended debate about health policy and that it was committed to a free NHS funded by taxation, which is a bit contradictory to Matthew.
It's not exactly revolutionary politics, is it?
No.
We'll put more money into the NHS. I don't think a single party hasn't made that pledge since about the 1940s. So yeah, I think he's just walking that line in a kind of pedestrian manner.
It was something, I think, reading online as well. I think UKIP's health secretary made a comment saying that he's absolutely no experience in health industry, and he would like, I am a health person for UKIP, but I have absolutely nothing to do in my past with health. I mean, interesting party system.
But that's the thing about UKIP, they're based in such a kind of emotive ideological message about immigration and, foreign people taking our jobs. Their policies can be absolute nonsense, and it's not going to really hurt them that much, because it's a party which appeals to, for better or worse, to people's hearts, depending if you recognise it or not. That's what they do. So I reckon they'll continue to gather momentum as it comes up to election, regardless if more and more, and probably more and more of these scandals will come out. I don't think it's going to hurt them too much.
Farage also said that it was unlikely that UK would join into a form of coalition with the Conservative Party after elections. And I mean, we've been through a coalition this term with Lib Dem and the Tory Party. What do you think about a UKIP and Tory coalition?
I think the only thing worse than Nick Clegg could be Nigel Farage. So yeah, I really desperately hope that doesn't happen. I don't think it will happen though.
Nah, I doubt it as well. Camilla, you've been here for about 3 years now. I mean, you've been through the coalition between Lib Dem and Tory. What do you make of a Tory and UKIP coalition? Would you fear for your lives and would just be like, nope, I'm not going to be here anymore?
Well, I have the alternative to just fly back to Norway, so I'll be fine.
Far. Pan will have a harder time flying back to China. She'll be like, crap. But yeah, what do you think about a UKIP and Tory coalition?
I don't think it's going to happen.
But if it was to happen, just purely hypothetical situation, if it was to happen,
well,
what would you do? Your first step was like election time, UKIP and Tory has got election.
I can't really vote in this country, so I wouldn't have a say.
No, but when the news broke, what would you do? Book your flight away?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't think it would affect me that much.
No, you don't. Yeah, maybe not. We'll see. Right, we'll come to a break, and then when we come back, we're talking about ISIS murdering Haruna Yukawa. I think all happened on the weekend. This is For the State on Radio Brunel. It's just 40 minutes past 4 p.m. on this Monday evening, and you're listening to the Brunel University's radio station, Radio Brunel, and this is the show that's going to tell you all about the news of the weekend. I am Jim Wong on For the State, and I'm joined today by Alistair, Pan and Camilla, talking about now a video was released or claiming, a recording claimed that Haruna Yukawa, one of two Japanese men taken hostage by Islamic State, has been beheaded. Shinzo Abe, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo has said that he appears to be genuine, and in the video he was quite heartfelt. He said it was not acceptable for them to be murdered. Barack Obama has said a statement condemning what he called the brutal murder, and that the US would stand shoulder to shoulder with Japan. He has called for the immediate release of the second Japanese hostage, 47-year-old journalist Kenji Goto. In the brief tape, a man claiming to be Goto said his cellmate is dead and pleads for his own life. Speaking, he said that ISIS had dropped its demand for a $1 million ransom, and instead wanted to organize a prisoner exchange for women held in Jordan. Now, just about that point, they did ask for $1 million ransom, and that was obviously never going to happen. But now they want to exchange a prisoner. How likely do you think that's going to happen, guys?
Well, just to kind of pick up on the earlier bit about the original prisoner and his alleged execution, I think this story is alarming for two main reasons, because it shows a progression in ISIS tactics. One is that the first Japanese prisoner, his ransom was $2 million US dollars, which is obviously a totally unfeasible amount. That was never going to happen, and ISIS, they would have known that wasn't ever going to happen. So they're making these demands which can't be kept, but rather they want the West to fail in paying ransoms, so they can have this exhibition of brutality, so they can have this, propaganda win in their minds of executing someone. So that first point, that shows, in my opinion, a kind of a move forward in their brutality. And secondly, is the fact they're targeting Japan. This is, if you can even call it a Western nation, that's debatable. It's very much in the fringe. It's isolationist. It doesn't really have any it has some minimal military kind of role in the operations in the Middle East, but it's not a military power. So they're really taking this kind of extremist rhetoric beyond what we would see as the West, Europe and the US, and they're taking it to other far-flung places like Japan, which again just shows their expansion in their scope and this kind of nihilistic, doom-saying, real apocalyptic viewpoint. So that's what I think I would say is really alarming, is that this seems a little bit different than the prior prisoners and executions of like the British journalists, etc.
Camilla, Pan, do you agree with Alice's comments?
I think it's horrible that this man has been executed, but ISIS is only making more enemies. And Japan is a big nation.
Wait, has it ever had any friends, ISIS? Do you think it ever had any friends?
No, but as long as it doesn't...
some sympathetic governments in the Middle East.
But okay, carry on, Camilla.
Yeah, now it's right what you say, that they don't have a lot of friends, but now it's more reason for them to take action, for Japan to show a bigger initiative and sending more troops.
But I mean, why Japan? Like, I didn't think Japan do anything to the ISIS.
I think they do. Jim probably be able to correct me.
UKIP was originally detained in April in northern Syria by anti-government militant group the Free Syrian Army, and Ghouta, who was in the area, was brought as an interpreter for the group to interrogate him. He was captured again sometime after 21st July, when his blog entry stopped in August. ISIS released a YouTube video showing him with a bleeding face and lying on the ground, identifying him as Japanese and not a spy. So they're So Ghouta was he's a journalist, freelance journalist, and also an author who runs a small media company, and then he went to Syria to cover the conflict, while UKIP went to Syria last year after a series of personal misfortunes, the Guardian has reported. So I guess it just happens, maybe the wrong place at the wrong time, but, that does happen. But yeah, Pam, carry on. Do you have anything else to add?
I mean, first I don't understand why it's Japan, but I don't think the 2 million will ever happen. What I read is the United States actually warned the Japan that if they are going to give them the money, the relationship between the United States and the Japan will become a big problem. So I don't know what will happen.
How did the Chinese media report this story?
Chinese just translate it.
Okay, because it's always been tensions between Japan and China,
Yeah,
so I was wondering how they would...
No, they just translate everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, going on to a bit of a business headlines, British Airways owner has reportedly cleared for a takeover of Aer Lingus. After the international airlines group made a third offer valuing the Dublin-based carrier at around 1.3 billion euros and equivalent to £1 billion. Aer Lingus may make a statement tomorrow on Monday morning at a stock exchange, confirming the new approach by AIG at around €2.50 at a share, having previously rejected bids of worth 2.3 €30 and €2.40. I don't know. Has anyone ever flown Aer Lingus before?
Yeah.
Yeah, how is it?
Yeah, it's good. It's not like Ryanair. It's like the slightly more premium Irish airlines. They fly a lot of transatlantic flights because Dublin Airport has you can pass US customs before actually entering the US, so you can kind of get your visa, etc. before you go. But I don't know. Do you think it'll become a political thing? This, British Airways taking over the Irish national airline, that could obviously have some significance historically and kind of emotionally to Irish people potentially. Depending if you're a unionist or Republican.
I think so. I think it does. I think it could have some kind of effect on that. I mean, I don't know how to make of it. Its fortune Aer Lingus has improved over recent months under Chief Executive Christoph Müller, who left to run Malaysian Airlines. The airline has reported its strongest summer trading performance since the financial crisis, with operating profits up 19% to €112.9 million in the quarter to 30th September. Aer Lingus and IAG have both declined to comment, and I guess so we'll have to wait until Monday morning to really see what's going to happen. But, I mean, like you said, Alistair, it's going to be interesting to see that not only pan out financially, but also sort of culturally and politically how it's going to sort of pan out. Our last story from The Guardian, it's about Scotland. So Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister, has said that Scottish voters want a Labour government at Westminster dependent on SNP support. She said having a minority Labour government relying on SNP votes rather than a majority one would lead to better decisions for Scotland, but also more decisions progressively for the whole of the UK. Do you agree with Sturgeon's comments, Alistair?
I think it's really a matter if I agree or not.
Yeah.
Looking at it objectively, so
Yes.
I'm trying not to let my subjectivity enter this. I think what the SNP are really saying is that they outright would not have any dealings with the Conservatives, but Labour is a potential. But the SNP have a significantly less kind of warm relationship with Labour as a lot of people think. They are both centre, left, kind of social democratic parties, but obviously Labour were pivotal in kind of the final push to make sure Scotland didn't leave the United Kingdom back during the referendum. I think the SNP realise that they are on the cusp of gaining serious representation in the House of Commons, and that this is something they can really monopolise on if they can enter a coalition with a government with a coalition government with Labour, that they could influence policies and their ultimate goal, their raison d'etre, to lead Scotland to independence, just tenfold if they were in a seat of power themselves. What I think is unlikely is that if they do enter some kind of government, I think it's very unlikely their relationship with Labour will stay kind of cooperative, in the sense that Labour will, I'd imagine, largely try to stem any independent rhetoric coming from the government. So I'm not sure how useful a pedestal it'll be. But in terms of just further devolution and emancipation for Scotland, I think it would be excellent if it was a Labour and SNP coalition. But I think there might need to be a third party. The Greens might need to be represented, because I don't know if they'd get enough seats. Do you know where Labour stand in the polls at the minute? I think they're marginally ahead of the Conservatives, but I think it is very, very close. And the SNP, they're set to win 40 seats in Scotland of the 49, which would be a stomping victory. But it'll be interesting. Can you imagine how almost ironic it would be if a party dedicated to the kind of division of the United Kingdom was in the British government? It'd be like, UKIP getting serious representation in the European Parliament. It's just democracy at its most hilariously kind of ironic and hypocritical.
Indeed. Nicola Sturgeon said that although SNP would not vote on purely English matters at Westminster, they would instead vote on English health laws, because health spending decisions would have a direct knock-on effect for Scotland's budgets. In the past, some figures have argued that Scotland would not necessarily need a second referendum to become independent, and that other mechanisms, such as election of a second majority SNP government at Hollywod in 2016, could lead it to actually breaking away from the UK. And like you said, SNP could be on course to win as many as 55 of the country's 59 seats. So we'll see how that goes out in 2015. We're going to cut to a small break, and when we come back, we're going to cover some news from The Independent and The Washington Post as well. This is Cover State on Radio Brunel. This is the Cover State on Radio Brunel, Brunel University student-run station. As we all know already, I think by now, this is the show that can talk to you about the news and issues of the week. Moving on to news from The Independent. U.S. comedian Bill Maher has slammed American Sniper for glorifying psychopath patriot Chris Kyle. He says that in comparison to, the Hurt Locker, which made in 2008, he said the Hurt Locker made $70 million compared to Sniper's $90 million profit because it was a little ambiguous and thoughtful. Well, this one is an American hero, psychopath patriot, and we love him. Now, there's always been comments about people who do movies about American soldiers in war. They say it glorifies American the role in the war, making sort of a different story. But they're talking about the crimes they've had. I mean, as all of us non-Americans, what do you make of movies that center around American U.S. soldiers? Camilla?
I think they all have their own propaganda and they want a certain message to come forward, and this is what American people wants to show the world. Most people in European countries watch American films, and this is the impression they're going to get.
So what sort of picture do you have of these? I mean, have you watched any of these war movies by Hollywod?
Oh, I haven't watched that many.
Did you watch Hurt Locker?
No.
Did you watch Zero Dark 30?
No.
Okay.
I think, yeah, there is definitely a level of jingoism with American war movies. I'm not really too sure if I buy into the argument that they're kind of almost surreptitious propaganda. That'd be going a bit far to say, in my opinion. But they do definitely glorify war, and I've not actually seen American Sniper, but other war movies similar to it tend to paint American foreign policy as quite a righteous act of liberation and emancipation, particularly in the Middle East, where obviously that's not what it is, and it usually causes serious damage kind of to civilian populations and infrastructure in these countries. I don't really know, because supposedly this one it did try to balance its glorification of the US military in Iraq, or was it Afghanistan? I don't know. In one of those two wars, this was kind of set in, with the emotional harm which happened to the lead character. But I've not seen it. But I suppose if they do try and weight that, Clint Eastwood, the director, he's usually on point with his balancing and his kind of pacing of these things, and he's not the kind of person who would go with something as kind of barefaced and as obvious as a kind of war propaganda piece, I wouldn't think.
I would say that Pearl Harbor is a good example. It just shows the American side of the war and poor Americans, but they couldn't really see the damage they did in Hiroshima, for example.
Yeah. And with Pearl Harbor, you got that annoying love story as well, and that sort of film.
And also, I can't mention names.
Jim, you're a romantic, you know it.
But all the films about the Cold War from the American side is always Russia is the bad person in this film.
But for me, it's not about the how American, but I'm really wondering how are they going to show the Chris Kyle? Sorry, I'm bad at the names.
Chris Kyle.
Kyle as a movie. I watched Bill quoted in our a talk show, and he said Chris wrote some words like maybe war isn't fun, but I really enjoyed it, and I have been fighting, and I will always be fighting, and I love killing bad guys, even it with pain, and I love that. I love what I'm doing. So I think the sniper. Chris is kind of weird, but I don't know how the film will go with it. Like,
Well, we'll have to see it one day. But I mean, I wanted to ask you guys, because I mean, to me, it seems a lot of movies from the US. I mean, a lot of these movies about war come from the US, but not so much from like the UK and other countries. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think sort of a discrepancy between the US being sort of almost focused on a lot on making war movies compared to the UK and against other movies?
Because they need recruitment in the military, and I think this is a way of getting recruitment for people watching these films and thinking it's a good thing sending people to war, and they want to join because they get that.
You don't think Hollywood is independent of?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
no, I mean, like in China, we also have a lot of movies about wars, but I think like those Chinese movies are want to say like China was not that bad at the time, and China was like trying their best to save the country and maybe to educate the young, something like that. But I think
it's nationalism, and it's happening in every country. I mean, Norwegian films about war is about like Norwegian people doing the right thing, and like, for example, Max Manus is a film about Second World War, and you see the opposition in Norway, what they did to fight the Nazis that invaded the country. But it's all only from one perspective. During the war, I wouldn't say 50-50, but it was people supporting the Nazis and people fighting on the Soviet side. But it's the outcome of the war. That's why they made that angle to the film.
What about the UK? I mean, I can't think at my top of my head any UK war movies at the moment. I mean, I don't know when
Not like
the last one was.
there's a lot of kind of Second World War movies, but I can't really think of any contemporary ones.
Yeah.
I think American audiences just have a kind of really vociferous appetite for war films and violence, and that there's this American exceptionalism things, the Star-Spangled Stripes. They just desperately kind of buy into that patriotism and the idea of America being, the world's only superpower, and they police the brutal and barbaric kind of states outside of their realm of influence. And yeah, I think that definitely comes across. But saying that, I love war movies. I love all that drama and explosions and daft kind of dramatic music and stuff. I'm not sure I agree with you necessarily that it's all propaganda for like recruitment purposes. I'm not. I don't know. I'm not sure I buy into that necessarily, because a lot of them do show the barbarity of war, and I think that's fair.
I think what needs to be more propaganda, I guess, is just for recruitment. I think it's the police. I mean, I don't think they're getting a lot of recruitment, just both in the US and the UK. I mean, that needs a movie. I think that's in the police movie. But yeah, about movies and war and showing sort of the bad side of it. I mean, I don't know whether you've watched Zero Dark 30, but maybe because I'm not American, that when I watched them shoot down Osama bin Laden, it wasn't really very, like, wow to me. It was just okay, it didn't seem like a huge thing. I don't know, maybe I'm used to like massive gunfights and the sort of drama, that when it just happened it was like, that's a bit amateurish, or just a bit more like low effect kind of stuff. I don't know. We're going to move on again, but while the UK doesn't have much their own movie to talk about, there is happening about the report about the reason why the UK went into the Iraq war. So apparently 6 wise men gave warnings to Tony Blair during his presidential prime minister term about the poorly launched, poorly planned campaign to go into Iraq. 6 wise men were all academics, except expert in Iraq, the Middle East and international affairs. They were called into the cabinet room to outline the worst that could happen if Britain and the United States launched an invasion into Iraq. Apparently, if only the Prime Minister and his advisor had listened to and acted on the warnings on that day in November 2002, the world could have changed a bit. We're still waiting for Lord Chilcott's long-delayed report into Britain's part in the war, But 46 men have spoken to The Independent on Sunday about how and why things turned out even worse than they predicted. One of them warned that Iraqis would fight for the country against invaders rather than celebrate the fall of their leader Saddam Hussein, and that a long and nasty civil war would follow. And they were kind of correct, Not everyone praised US's and UK's intervention into Iraq. So there's obviously two things happening here. Where is the report? What's taking it so long? And then it's sort of, it's a bit also too little too late. We can't really go back in time and change what happened. I mean, what do you make of this, guys?
I think the most positive thing which could come out of this would be instilling a reticence in the British government about re-entering Iraq regarding the Islamic State. I think it was Tony Blair himself, it must have been October or November last year, he published an essay about the need for boots on the ground in Iraq at the moment, to re-enter active military troops to fight Islamic State. But I think, country, it's this east-west dichotomy. For millennia, the West has been invading the East, and the East has been, invading parts of the West and Eastern Europe. And it's never achieved anything. No entering army has ever been met with jubilation by the civilian population. They've never been welcomed. There's just fundamental differences in culture and practice and religion, and just all these things. They're never going to coexist terribly well. So an occupation is never going to work. You were saying, had things been different, what was it, back in 2003, and this advice to enter Iraq, it hadn't materialised, the world would be totally different. But who knows? Maybe the country would have fallen apart anyway, with Saddam remaining in power.
I think it could be 100 wise academics that would have told Tony Blair to not go to war, but he would do what the Americans would do. He would just follow whatever they said, whatever they do.
That's interesting. Pan, do you agree with that statement? Do you agree with Camilla? Would you think Tony Blair would just go into war?
I think if Blair didn't go to war, but maybe something else will happen. We don't know. Maybe it won't be a better result. Who knows? But
I think the Americans was going to war anyway, and the UK didn't want to get disapproval from the Americans, so they just followed.
Okay, interesting. So Blair has been put on the defence for the past few days in advance against the kicking he's going to get from Lord Chilcot and the panel behind the investigations. There has been outrage at the news that the report will not be published until the election, but which is a bit interesting as well. But Dr. Dodge believes it's partly because members of the panel want to get the draft of history absolutely right and that they will not pull punches. We're going to talk to her about our last story from The Independent, and it's also again about Hollywod. Benedict Cumberbatch, Sherlock star, has said Hollywod is better for British black actors. He thinks it's, as far as coloured actors go, it gets kind of difficult in the UK, which is a bit of interesting considering Oscars, when they came with the nominations, it's quite a white-dominated nominations list. And so for him to say something about that, it's a bit of ironic that they say it's a bit easier, but they don't get as much commendation. I mean, yeah. Do you think there's a hard sort of industry for black actors in the UK compared to the US?
I don't know how the black actors in the UK, but I think the black actors are kind of really welcome in the American. If we think about those American movies and think about those black actors in the American movies, they're always kind and nice and wise, clever, something like that. I think the American movies are really trying to use those black actors and use them as a good character or good personality to show that people should respect those black guys or shouldn't look down on them, something like that. So I think they are really welcomed in America.
Yeah. So there have been a number of black British stars who have found fame across the Atlantic, including Idris Elba, who is actually British, not American, on The Wire, Chiwetel Ejiofor in 12 Years a Slave, and David Harewood on Homeland. This year's Martin Luther King Jr. biopic Selma, David Oyelowo has received critical acclaim for his portrayal as civil rights, but was also not nominated for a nomination, despite being Holly tipped as one. So, I mean, it's weird because Benedict has been nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor of the Year in the Oscars, but his comments say something else compared to who's been nominated. But I mean, it's interesting. What do you think? I mean, in sort of the UK industry of TV and movies, I mean, how well do you think black and ethnic groups are represented in the UK? Camilla?
To be honest, I don't watch that.
Watch TV? Huh.
I haven't owned a TV for 4 years, so.
Oh, shame.
But yeah, like the only British series I can think of that I watched is Downton Abbey,
and that has
doesn't
not
have a lot of
no.
black representation. So yeah, maybe I agree.
That makes a bit of sense as well. I mean,
but when I watch British films, it's mostly about detectives or Agatha Christie movies, and it's not many.
Can you imagine a black Sherlock?
No. Because that's the impression with all the movies that's been made about Sherlock Holmes. You haven't really. He is white. He is typically British. So I don't know, to be honest.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's lots of speculation that the next James Bond maybe black.
I think that'd be quite good to see.
That'd be excellent. Yeah,
I would enjoy that actually.
Idris Elba would be excellent. He's a wee bit too old. I think 10 years ago, because he's actually older than Daniel Craig. I think he's in his late 40s now. Which is a shame because he's got a kind of stoicism and class and kind of that really demure quality, which would be excellent for Bond. But I think he's a little bit too old. What about Chiwetel Ejiofor? He's still in his 30s, possibly.
He might be, but I don't think he's sort of the
same swagger.
Yeah, I don't think so. He's been a bit more happy, I guess, compared to James Bond. Doesn't seem very happy most of the time.
But yeah, I think it's something really iconic, a really iconic role like James Bond or Sherlock for a studio to make that ballsy decision to cast a kind of a more ethnically diverse actor. I think that'd be excellent. It probably would shake the whole system up. I hadn't really given it much thought though, but I guess it's right. Yeah, you don't really, because in just about every kind of employment sector, you always hear about these programs and initiatives to introduce more black and people from kind of other parts of the world, but not really in the entertainment industry.
No. So, comedian Lenny Harry had launched a campaign last year calling for a greater presence of people of black and Asian and minority ethnic, also BAME, in the British broadcasting industry. Since that campaign has begun, BBC has announced a £2.1 million Diversity Creative Talent Fund, which is good luck for Pan and I, for the development of ideas from BAME individuals across all genres, including with traineeships. Channel 4 has set out a new series diversity targets that must be met, otherwise executives face bonus cuts. Sky 2 has pledged for, by the end of 2015, 20% of stars and writers for its UK TV shows would come from a BAME background. I just want to talk a bit about Channel 4. I mean, I don't know whether people should actually face backlash against being unable to meet targets for diversity of individuals in the company. I mean, I would prefer people not hiring just based on their background rather than more than talent, but saying, oh, we couldn't hire enough people. It's not like, why should people get cut because...
No, but I see that in every application I apply for, both in Norway and here. They are looking for diversity, they're looking for people from different backgrounds. Yeah. And whenever I'm filling out, I'm like, white, female. I don't feel like I'm gonna get a job because of my diversity.
For mine, it goes black Chinese or British Chinese, and then goes Chinese only. I'm like, nah, this is kind of plain and boring.
Shouldn't they just be looking for people with the best qualification and the best person for the job?
I think the thing with positive discrimination is that it's the issue of discrimination is a systemic thing. So people from ethnic backgrounds often find themselves without the advantages of Caucasian people, particularly in Britain, and you could spend hours arguing why that is, kind of culturally and economically, but it's just a fact. And so at a higher, at an employment level, these changes have to be made. Then it can kind of filter down to the very bottom, and hopefully that can foster in generations to come a greater quality from the start. So yeah, but it does. Sometimes you feel a bit uncomfortable almost filling out your nationality, because you think in this day and age you shouldn't be saying I'm white or I'm black or I'm it seems as if it should be irrelevant, but I think that's the only way they can do it, to introduce a more kind of ethnically diverse representation.
Indeed. Alright, we'll cut to our sort of last break, or second last break. When we come back, we're talking about the Telegraph and the Washington Post. This is Hover State on Radio Brunel. Is nearly a 5:30, and you're listening to Hover State on Radio Brunel, Brunel University student-run station. Now, moving on to the news from the Telegraph. After much controversy and debate, David Cameron apparently will take part in TV debates, according to the chairman of the Conservative Party, Grant Shapps. He gave a very strong hint that the Prime Minister has been preparing to set plans for the broadcaster for 2 7 Ways debate. The BBC, Sky, ITV and Channel 4 said that if any party leader refuses to take part in debates with those who began the invitation, it'd be just not going to happen. In a renewed offer, broadcasters proposed 2 debates involving 7 parties: the Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats, SNP, UKIP, Greens and Plaid Cymru, and a 3rd debate between Mr. Cameron and Mr. Miliband. We began to talk about this, but I think last week as well, about Cameron saying, I'm not going to be part of the debate. And on one level, I do see him saying, why should UKIP and Labour be allowed, but not Greens in a debate, which I see as, just more sort of voice. But it's going to be weird to see a 7-way debate between 7 parties. It's going to be so noisy. You won't.
I don't know how it will actually work in practice. But I think, as would be expected, they've kind of opened the floodgates. I was reading today that the monster Raven Looney Party are livid that they're not getting a pedestal like the other parties, because they're arguing that they are older than the Liberal Democrats. So if they're deserving of representation in this programme, so should their party. That's obviously farcical, but more kind of serious is the DUP, the Irish Party, the Democratic Unionist Party. They are arguing if Plaid Cymru and the SNP, two kind of regional parties, want to split up the union, why shouldn't they, the DUP, who their kind of mantra is to keep the United Kingdom together, why aren't they being represented? So I think, the BBC, they've kind of put their foot in it a little bit by inviting so many different parties. But I suppose, again, that's the issue of democracy. You can't really limit who gets a platform and who doesn't without incurring some kind of wrath from some corner.
I'm curious to see as to how actually useful this debate would actually be, because people will watch it, but I do wonder how much is going to change their mind about how they're going to vote.
I reckon it's going to turn into a episode of Question Time, with 6 different people or 7 different people kind of sitting around arguing their totally different standpoints. I bet it does really well in the viewership, though. I bet it'll be an absolute killer in terms of how many people tune in.
But I don't think it'd be very effective in sort of changing their votes and see if someone's going to vote.
I wonder how the seating plan will go. Do you think they'll pair up the UKIP and Conservatives and SNP and Labour just to?
We'll see how that goes. Maybe it's like a lottery, just like a roll of ball and see who pulls it up next. Moving on to the Green Party as well, who have said that if they were to win power in May, British Army would be replaced by a Home Defence Force, and immigration control will be dismantled. Natalie Bennett, leader of the Greens, has said illegal migrants will be given the right to stay in the UK, and in the longer term, she wanted all immigration controls to be taken down. These are pretty strong promises, I think. She holds apparently no office at the moment, no properly role in the UK, other than leader of the Green Party. What do you think? Pan, Camilla, would you welcome no controls for immigration at the border? Would you be like, nope?
No.
Why not?
In Norway, we have pretty strict rules about immigrants, and you have to go through a whole process of being accepted and getting asylum in a country.
Mhm.
And I think if everyone who is in this country illegally, like, I don't know if there's any numbers of how many illegal immigrants there is in Britain, but I think those are things she needs to mention, actually, how many people this is and how many people it concerns and what are they actually doing in this country.
Mhm.
If they want to work, if they have escaped war. I think these are...
Yeah, you just can't say, we'll take everyone in because
No, it's like everyone. Like, who is everyone?
there's not
I
enough
think you need to
space in
figure
the
that
UK.
out first.
Yeah. Not really strong. Pan, what do you think?
Like
Would you prefer control or would you prefer no control? Would you prefer... What sort of level would you really want?
Actually, I don't know. Like in Hong Kong, I think many people in Hong Kong are illegal immigrants.
Mhm.
Like they're born in China and maybe they swim to Hong Kong and something
They
like
swim to Hong Kong.
swim. Yeah,
Can you actually do that?
it's not far.
Oh,
So yeah, and they're illegal, and then Hong Kong government said, okay, we can give those illegal immigrants the right to stay in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like, Hong Kong have a large population, and they start to blame the Chinese people, and they think it's all the Chinese people's fault to make Hong Kong a kind of disaster. So I don't have any opinion. Like,
I think it's important that the people who come into this country from another society, say if they're coming from the Middle East, for example, they need to be integrated in the society. You can't just say, yeah, here you go, live in England, and they don't know anything about the laws, how to get a job. They need kind of a course to learn all these things. It's just... Yeah.
I don't think, and a totally open border is never really going to work in a kind of global sense. I think it works within Europe. Well, debatably it works within Europe because it's a little kind of smaller in scope. I think the other point though about the Home Defence Force, I would agree with this. I think it's way overdue that Britain finally acknowledges that it has relinquished its kind of title as a world power. We don't need Trident missiles. We don't really need nuclear bombs. We don't really have any strategic interests which demand we need to have nuclear weapons. And I don't really think we need an offensive army anymore to go and invade people, because we're a member of NATO. The whole point of that is it's a collective security group where we can rely on the kind of military help of others, kind of read the United States, in the case or the situation there is some kind of conflict. So I think, the millions and millions you must save by reducing the armed forces, and that could be ploughed into kind of social initiatives and the NHS and all these kind of policies. I think that would be a wholeheartedly good thing. But I don't agree with the open border. That wouldn't work. That would cause far more problems than it would allay.
Okay. And now our very last story, is an interesting article from the Washington Post about if Britain were a US state, it would be the second poorest behind Alabama and before Mississippi. Now, it's a bit of a weird thing to look into as to what country would be where if it were part of the United States. But the ranking determined by Fraser Nelson, an editor of The Spectator magazine, said that by dividing the gross domestic product of each state by its population, it took into account purchasing power parity for cost of living, and they included several European countries as well. Ranked by GDP, California, which is the top GDP in the United States, would be knocked down to 14th place among states. Alaska comes in first with a GDP of more than $59 billion US, divided by a population of 735,000. Norway was the top European country on the list between Massachusetts and New Jersey, while United Kingdom would be second first behind Alabama and Mississippi. So Camilla has something to celebrate that over, I guess, being...
I could have told you this before this article.
You'd be like, no,
Norway's the best
for
country.
sure, obviously the best country. Now, other than this interesting finding, I'm curious about, because they made a comment, Nielsen, that income inequality and tension between races is very common and very visible in the United States because of factors such as white flight, which Britain doesn't have space for. But also Americans have a long, pretty likelihood to debate about these issues and to actually discuss it. He writes that no one beats America better than Americans. They openly debate their inequality, conduct rigorous studies about it, argue about economies versus culture and causes, and the debate is so fierce that the rest of the world looks on and joins in lamenting America's problems. A shame. We do better to get a little angrier at our own. So, I mean, do you think he has some truth to statement as that? Because the US is so vocal about its problems, other countries who aren't so vocal might actually suffer from not recognizing and not actually debating the issues that they probably have as well. I mean, America has such huge racial tension and huge income inequality, but I'm sure for other nations as well. The UK, I bet, Norway, I bet has some inequality as well. But do you think there's sort of some danger of actually not talking about it as much as they should, or as much as the United States does?
I'm not really sure I agree that the United States talk about their problems so well. Well, what about all the racial inequality and the kind of Ferguson and the other riots which came out of that?
I think it's more about they properly acknowledge this kind of issues and they make such a huge thing about it. They actually have protests about it. Well, I mean, would you have a Ferguson happening in the UK?
Oh, we did. We had the riots, but I suppose that was more people about nicking TVs from Curry's. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Are we too conservative, too reserved a country?
Yeah.
Historically, we're more likely just to get on with it and not argue. I'm not really too sure. The French, they are the biggest country for being incredibly vocal.
Yeah.
Which comes out of their revolutionary past. That any issue, you see these kind of protests and stuff in the streets. Like if the teacher's wage goes down marginally or something like that, they won't try and resolve it through any kind of democratic, not democratic, but any other less vocal means. We'll just hit the streets straight away. Which I suppose that's quite a good point. We are a wee bit more reserved in Britain. What about in China or Norway? I suppose,
China,
in Hong Kong, of course, you very vocal about your right to freedom of expression.
But it's only in Hong Kong, but in China, China had every problem. It's, I don't know.
The last time it was a protest before the Hong Kong, it was people got killed, and the numbers have never been released. It was in the 80s.
What,
not that one. I think the one before Hong Kong is 2010.
Well, there's always been debate. There's always been things with Tibet as well. It's always constant fights. But I mean, that sort of died down, hasn't it? I mean, it's still ongoing, but no one's really made a big deal out of it for about a year or so. But I mean, is there much change? I mean, yeah. I mean, it's one thing to talk about it and really debate about it and really fight about it, but it's another thing to make lots of change because.
In Norway, everyone is organized, so the protests
absolutely no bias whatsoever.
No, but the protests are so quiet. Last fall, the teachers, the educational, they had a protest, but it wasn't violent. It was basically because the organization, they have so much money that they can keep thousands of teachers out of school and still pay them, and the government have to listen to them because they can't have a lot of schools with no teachers and a lot of children. Mm-hmm. So basically the teachers won. But it wasn't anyone walking down the streets or protesting or screaming or making a big fuss about it. They got their way and it happened really
Yeah. Well,
that's how it is.
It's interesting finding to find, these countries panning out in the United States. But I mean, what about the opposite? How will the US fare in the European Union? I mean, why is it? Where's the opposite result? I don't know how would each state compare to going to a different continent. But that's one thing that they should conduct. And that's pretty much it for our today's show of For State. That you heard from today, Alistair, Pan, and Camilla. And that's me from Jim Wong as well, your host of For State. Join us again on Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. as we talk about the news across from Monday to Thursdays. Until then, say goodbye, guys.
Bye.
That's goodbye for me as well.
I'm running out of patience 'cause I can't believe